20-year-old rape survivor Ongamele Ntlanganiso is still on the quest to find justice after being gang raped in 2020. According to the SAPS, the case was referred to the Senior Public Prosecutor on the 16th of November 2020 for consultation and decision. However, the docket was then returned to the Nyanga Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offence Unit on the 24th November of 2020 with the instructions to withdraw the case. And now in the third part of our senior reporter Zanele Mvana's series on Ntlanganiso, she reveals how Ntlanganiso as well as her family are currently coping and are trying to find answers to the prosecutor's life-changing decision. The reporter now joins us in studio to shed light on the story. Zanele Mvana, thank you for joining us. We understand that you've been dealing with the story very closely. Before we go into the conversation, can you just tell us a bit more about how the family is currently coping?
Well, we do know that in 2020, Ongamele Ntlanganiso was brutally assaulted by 3 individuals that she knew. Now, 4 years later, her family is still in the quest to seek justice, as we know that 3 of the perpetrators were never arrested, even though she had opened a case earlier that day after being assaulted at the Gugulethu police station. But to our surprise, as was interviewing the family and Ongamele herself, they made mention that they were informed by the detective handling her case that her case was withdrawn, even though it never made it to court. Now, this was quite a surprise to me as a journalist, and I also spoke to a criminal lawyer just trying to navigate as to what could be the reason for a victim's case, specifically when it comes to gender-based violence, to be withdrawn, even though it has not reached the court. Now, that lawyer made mention that the state and the South African Police Services GBV desk in particular failed the victim because they should have brought her into that consultation with the alleged perpetrators as well and speak together to try and find out, linking to the evidence that the victim brought forward to the South African Police Services, to try and link those perpetrators to the ordeal that took place on that fateful day and try and navigate as to what could be the reasons to actually withdraw this case, even though it never made it to court. While we do know that in South Africa, cases of gender-based violence in particular, some of them don't make it to court even. Now, it's nearly 1 in 5 that do make it in court. Now, the gender-based violence organizations has actually says that this has been a slap on the face to victims and families of gender-based violence and femicide, and saying that the South African Police Services GBV desk does not take matters of this nature seriously. Now, Ongamele's family is really in anguish and despair, not knowing as to which further steps to take, as this case has really taken an emotional toll on the family and the victim as well, saying that they will keep on fighting for justice for their daughter.
And I understand now, as you just mentioned, that the family does want to fight for justice, and you had an opportunity to speak to a criminal lawyer. What are some of the questions that you asked that you think will be beneficial pertaining this particular case?
Definitely. Well, the first question I asked the criminal lawyer is what could be the reason why for this case in particular to be withdrawn, even though it never made it to court. Now, he said that one of the reasons could have been that the state prosecutor with the detective made that decision together without involving the victim, which is very unfair. Now, they've made a decision without having further information regarding this case in particular. Now, Ongamele and her family are really on the quest to having the perpetrators to be held accountable, as we know that 4 years later, no arrests have been made, even though the South African Police Services were actually given evidence that links 3 of those perpetrators to the rape that occurred in September of 2020.
So now, like you mentioned, that it is 4 years later and no one has been arrested. What happens to the case now? What can the victim do? What can the family do to ensure that justice is served?
Definitely. While speaking to the criminal lawyer this morning, he made mention that since Ongamele has been receiving threats from the alleged perpetrators, that she should now open a case of intimidation, not a new case, but rather add an extra charge to the case that she already has. So what she'll have to do is go to the police and to the detective who's handling her case and inform him that the perpetrators are now actually threatening her and that her life is now in danger. So they can open a case, another case on top of this one, which will be called a case of intimidation, besides the one of rape, and to cause grievous bodily harm.
Well, thank you very much, Zanele, for giving us that intentful update on the case, and we hope that you continue to stay closely on the case. Thank you once again for joining us in studio.
Thanks.
Well, that was our senior reporter, Zanele Mvana, working closely together with the victim and finding ways on how to better handle this case.